The time has come for the Chesnaught PvP IV deep dive. With the community day, Chesnaught's getting Frenzy Plant, so Chesnaught may be better now than it ever has been before, so I figured I may as well put its PvP IVs under the microscope for Great League specifically. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the Pokemon's hidden stats and breakpoints and complicated PvP stuff. If you don't understand all that already, I highly recommend checking out my PvP IVs simplified video, link above and in the description. Basically, get your feet wet before you dive off into the deep end here. And then also, if you want to reference any of this information in a text-based format, linked in the description, I have my article on GamePress, the Chesnaught PvP IV Deep Dive, which will cover all the information I cover in this video and more pertaining to Chesnaught's PvP IVs. Additionally, the GamePress article has links to PvP IV tables, making it a lot easier to find which IVs have the stats that I talk about in this video. And without further ado, let's get into Chesnaught here. Starting out with some Chesnaught Basics, Chesnaught is a grass fighting dual type Pokemon, which gives it a unique resistance profile to the powerful rock and ground type coverage combo, as seen on Dunsparce and Galarian Stunfisk, so it can make it a pretty potent hard counter to those Pokemon. Big drawback that it has, though, is that both of those types are weak to flying type hits. Flying types are kind of the name of the game in the current meta, so it is a pretty vulnerable Pokemon in that respect. Additionally, Chesnaught has Frenzy Plant and Superpower to work with, which makes it kind of like a slightly slower but bulkier and harder hitting analog to Lurantis. In fact, Chesnaught did see some niche play in the past as like this Galarian Stunfisk hard counter core breaker type Pokemon until Lurantis came in and basically did that job better. Now Chesnaught's kind of retaking its throne with having Frenzy Plant because, Energy Ball is a pretty bad attack. Frenzy Plant, a really good attack, right? So it kind of makes sense why Lurantis kind of stole the show and how Chesnaught is kind of stealing it right back here, right? A little fun fact about Chesnaught too is that Chesnaught also has Smackdown as a viable fast move option. Unfortunately, Smackdown isn't like aggressive enough against flying type Pokemon where it's not a good attack unless you're getting that double super effective coverage in. So like a flying fire type Pokemon like Talonflame would be totally freaked out by Smackdown, right? But for general flying type Pokemon like, Pelipper or Noctowl, Altaria, they don't really care about Smackdown. So it's an interesting meme. Maybe in some limited formats it could be a viable option, but for the most part, Vine Whip is going to be the way to go for Chesnaught. When it comes to Chesnaught's PvP IVs and stat checks for the Great League, I noticed two main trends kind of stood out for it. One is having high bulk, which is pretty straightforward, and then the other one is having charge move priority on Frostlass, so a relatively high attack weight going on. Both options are very viable and they all have their own advantages and disadvantages, so it's not exactly clear cut which one's going to be the best one, so I'll leave that to you to decide. I think the best way to approach the situation overall, though, is to just have various stat weights of Chesnaught that meet these stat checks, and then when the time comes to actually use Chesnaught in a meta, then power up the one that makes most sense for that kind of scenario, because at the end of the day, Chesnaught is still like an off-meta, spicy cup kind of Pokemon, so I think it makes the most amount of sense to power up the Chesnaught that you're actually going to use rather than pre-powering them up, which some people like to do. I don't know. It's up to you to decide. I'll go through all the different advantages and disadvantages for you here, though. Here I have the 48 different IV spreads that meet the requirements to being a high bulk Chesnaught. No attack set is considered. The defense is cut at 122.21 defense. So you can see there the lowest one here is 122.4. This defense is important for the Pelipper matchup. This isn't based on the rank 1 Pelipper, but it is based on a reasonable attack stat that you could see from like a top 20 stat product kind of Pelipper there. So obviously having more defense can fortify you even more against Pelipper. Pelipper is a pretty bad matchup for us, but with the defense stat, avoiding the wing attack breakpoint, you can overcome it in the 2-1 shield scenario and possibly in the 1-0 shield scenario as well, so that's pretty cool. Then when it comes to the HP stat, the HP is cut at 127. This is for consistency against the Lickitung matchup in the 2-2 shield scenario. You could run as low as 125 HP though, and be okay for the most part. But for the sake of consistency and having like a ubiquitous catch-all high bulk kind of Chesnaught, I felt it was kind of important to cut it at 127 HP, especially in the absence of like more important defense checks, right? But if you know what you're doing, you know how to analyze PvP IVs and matchups on PvPoke yourself, you could thrift as low as 125 HP, in my opinion. Now, another interesting thing to highlight would be the 129 HPers here. They got this unique quality where they can overcome Pelipper in the even 1-0 shield scenario. So you spend 1 shield, they spend no shields, and you survive with just 1 HP, provided that you meet the defense check yet, and you can overcome them there. Obviously, if it's like a counter swap kind of scenario, then you're going to have more energy to begin with. But if you do find yourself locked into this even Steven kind of scenario, and you just happen to have like the rank 8 or rank 29 Chesnaught, well, at least you know you have this like little extra layer of tech that the Pelipper might not be expecting. Another thing to highlight too is having an attack stat of 119.3 or higher. This can get a breakpoint on the rank 1 Scrafty, enabling you to overcome it in the 0-1 shield scenario, and also making the 1-1 shield scenario a bit more consistent. It's hard to say if like the rank 50 is going to be better than all the other ones just because of the Scrafty tech, but if you happen to have one of these ones, well, the Scrafty tech is worthwhile to be aware of. And here I have a PvP IV table focusing on the high attack weight Chesnaught, aka the Frostlass Slayer. Now, main thing with this is having a high enough attack stat to reasonably get charge move priority on Frostlass. When it comes to getting charge move priority on Frostlass, it's not just about Frostlass either. You can also get charge move priority on Sableye, on Pelipper, Venusaur, and Swampert as well, and a whole bunch of other Pokemon that happen to have that similar attack weight. It's a pretty common attack weight in Great League PvP, so getting that little bit of an extra attack weight so you can overcome them in those matchups where you get into a CMP tie, it can be pretty useful for Chesnaught there. The defense and the HP check here are also curated, so you can still maintain a lot of the Galarian, Stunfisk, and Bastiodon shield disadvantage scenarios. So while chasing that CMP, it might be important to still have that level of bulk going on so you can still manage those matchups pretty well. Now, when it comes to this attack weight, like, how can you be so certain that it's going to get Frostlass CMP? Like, wouldn't I want to go with an even higher attack weight than this? And the thing is that while Frostlass does enjoy having CMP, Frostlass also enjoys having a high amount of bulk too. And I haven't done the Frostlass PvP IV deep dive yet. I have most of the information for it for the high bulk Frostlasses, and I noticed that there's a pretty narrow range of attack weight that Frostlass can kind of play with before it starts losing out on having some of its more high bulk matchups work out for it, right? So when it comes to that attack weight range for Frostlass, this attack weight range that a lot of, top tournament finishing Frostlasses also happen to correlate with, well, this attack weight just goes a little bit above and beyond that, so you can get charge move priority on them most consistently. So the main utility with this is that in the open meta, or maybe in a Frostlass kind of heavy cup format, this gets you charge move priority on Frostlass, so you can win the 1-1 and 2-2 shield scenarios, which is pretty big. You don't have to worry about having the defense breakpoint for Frostlass or not. I don't think any of these will reasonably get the defense breakpoint for Frostlass, and it doesn't hurt your viability against Frostlass either. You still have the same exact win conditions against it, even more so because you have a more consistent charge move priority against them. So pretty big deal for Chesnaught here. Then to add to this, we also have this spin on the situation, which has more of a defense focus, less of an HP focus. This will hurt you in some of the Galarian Stunfisk matchups, but the trade-off is that you've got more viability in the Pelipper matchups, so to each their own. There's only 23 on this list and only 7 on this list, so you might not have any of them. This is just kind of expanding your options while still maintaining that level of optimization for Chesnaught here. And one cool thing to highlight too with these IV spreads is how clean they look too. Like, you got the 15-12-12 coming in at 122.4 attack, 122.4 defense, and 122 HP. Like, that just looks neat, right? But which one's more viable? I mean, honestly, it comes down to what meta you find yourself in, right? Or which ones you actually have as an option to work with. Now, you might be sitting back going, Ryan Swag, how am I supposed to find any of these IV spreads during Community Day? I gotta catch, like, I can catch thousands of them, and I only got bag space, like room for like 100, maybe 200. So how do I know if I'm not tossing out the golden ones here? And for that, I want to direct you to my Arubki method PvP IV hunting video, link up above and in the description. Basically, by using these long reverse search strings, you can eliminate all the options that aren't these PvP IVs. So then when you go home, you can just check through like the 50 or so that you have left over and see which ones you got. But for mass transferring, you can transfer like hundreds of them, and you won't touch the high bulk ones or these attack weighted ones if you use the reverse search string properly. So link to Arubki's list in the description. At the time of recording this, I don't think he has it up yet, but before the community day, it should be up. Another thing you can do is use the forward search strings, which can be auto-generated here on PvPIVs.com, which brings up a search string that will highlight the Pokemon that meet the stat checks. The thing is that this doesn't lump together like all the different IV spreads that I talk about here. It's just for each particular list, but this is a more simple way to go about it too, especially if your phone doesn't have the like text limit thing going on to do the Arubki method. It's talked about in the video that I have linked, but it can be a little bit complicated to do the Arubki method sometimes. But with this method, it'll highlight the ones that do have the stats. So you can star them, and then you can mass transfer all the ones that don't have stars. Thing to mention about this method is that it does have false positives, so there are stinky IVs that will fall into the mix there. With the Arubki method, it'll also have the false, I guess, negative situation going on, where some of the stinky IVs might not be highlighted, so you can't toss all the stinky ones. Some stinky ones survive. What's important, though, is that it doesn't have any false negatives, right, on either method. So you won't be tossing the good IVs, depending on which method you use there. So yeah, so when it comes to looking for these IVs, it's like, what? How do I find this goofy stuff? Well, using the search strings can make it a lot easier to do that. Now you may be sitting back thinking, Ryan Swag, you're talking about the rank 821 Chesnaught. You know, the rank 1124 Chesnaught. That's absurd. That is so not high stat product. I am very uncomfortable about this. I'm not sure if I'd ever be willing to dip my toes into this wild nonsense here. Well, I have a little interesting example here for you. So here on the right, we have the rank 1 Venusaur, and you can see that it has 121 attack, 124 defense, and 123 stamina. And on the left, we have the high attack weight, wackadoodle, rank 821 Chesnaught. Absurd. Insanity, right? But you can see its stats, you can see its stat product. It has basically the same stats as the rank 1 Venusaur. So while there are advantages to having a higher stat product Chesnaught, I talked about those advantages earlier in the video. I'm not saying that high attack weight Chesnaught is definitively the best Chesnaught. What I'm trying to get at here is that if it's okay for Venusaur to have these stats, why is it like discomforting or bad for Chesnaught to have these stats? And then when you consider the CMP advantage that Chesnaught can get against Frostlass and other Pokemon, this could be an ideal stat range for Chesnaught to have. And if you check out the Venusaur PvP IV Deep Dive, link up above and in the description, Venusaur's most ideal stat weights end up having a slight attack weight as well for those same exact charge move priority advantages. So it's just looking a lot like Venusaur, right? And if it's okay for Venusaur, I think it should be okay for Chesnaught too. So while you are thinking about it as the goofy rank 800 Chesnaught high attack wild man Chesnaught here, well, it's the rank 1 Venusaur, dude. The rank 1 Venusaur, same thing. So yeah, just trying to expand your horizon where it's like stat product isn't everything. What is important is what stats the Pokemon actually have and how they take advantage of their stats, which is what I try to break down and highlight in these videos. So that's all I got to say about Chesnaught for now. Once again, if you want to check out those PvP IV tables, link in the description to my article on GamePress, which has links to the PvP IV tables, right? And if you have any questions on this content, of course, comment below, let me know what's up, and I'll be happy to help you out. And if you enjoyed this kind of content, you want to see more like it, well, make sure to subscribe to SwagTips. SwagTips. I'd also like to give a special shout out to these Patreon supporters. If you want to support Swagman on Patreon, link in the description. Ryan Swag is alive. Yeah, I haven't uploaded for like the past 2 weeks here. I know it's mostly because of like my work schedule and the holidays just kind of not meshing well with making YouTube content. Basically flip-flopping day shift to night shift and having to be like gone for a whole weekend and stuff for holidays made it really difficult for me to make videos, right? But things are kind of sorted out for now, so I'm making videos again. So if you're wondering where I went, that's where I went. I'm back now. It's PvP IV Deep Dive time, baby.